deep sleep healing. Let go of the weight you carry for others. There is a rigid, heavy numbness settling deep in your jaw, and a dry, locked tightness across the very center of your collarbones. It is the silent, muscular strain of keeping yourself completely guarded, holding your breath to ensure that no one sees a single unpolished edge of your true self. You have spent your day holding a posture of absolute correctness, desperately hiding your doubts, and keeping your inner life folded tightly away like a secret in a dark box. You are so terrified of making a visible mistake or showing your raw, unfinished thoughts that you have chosen a quiet, frozen safety instead of real expression. But this stiff, defensive stillness is not a sign of a ruined spirit. Tonight, your life is not required to show a perfect, completed painting to the world. You are not a fragile ornament that will shatter if you show a single tear, and absolutely nothing will be forced to open or display its inner colors before you are ready. The space around you is softening into the deep, quiet atmosphere of a wide wooden veranda overlooking a dark forest of wild plum trees. The night air up here is cool and clean, carrying the damp, refreshing scent of a sudden summer rain that has just passed over the mountains. You can smell the sharp, green fragrance of wet plum blossoms, the clean aroma of fresh rice paste drying on screens, and the herbal, woody scent of raw split bamboo resting on the floorboards. Beneath your back, the firm mattress supports your physical frame with the steady, quiet strength of a dark cedar veranda, requiring no active balance and no effort from your tired muscles. The distant, comparative noise of the crowded towns is completely gone, leaving only the slow, rhythmic dripping of the rain as it falls from the wide tiled eaves into the dark soil below. In this cool, spacious shelter, you are fully permitted to let your shoulders drop, without any obligation to defend your worth or project a flawless exterior to the dark. It is a quiet, painful paradox of our inner lives that the more we try to protect a perfect image of ourselves, the more stiff, suffocated, and exhausted our spirit becomes. We believe that if we can just present a completely unblemished surface to the world, we will finally be safe from the pain of judgment and rejection. We treat our chronic self-policing as a necessary armor, keeping our feelings folded flat and dry in a dark lacquer box where no wind can ever reach them. But ancient Buddhist wisdom offers a surprising, liberating truth about this protective frieze. Your true being is not a fragile, painted screen that must be defended from every passing breeze. Your essence is fundamentally unconditioned, meaning it is already empty of flaws, completely spacious and entirely undamaged by the natural movements of life and action. The plain, white paper of your heart does not need to be decorated with a perfect design to be complete, and it does not lose its value when it feels the rain. Dear friend, right now, maybe you have felt this quiet, heavy exhaustion too, this constant, weary labor of keeping yourself tightly folded, so that no one can see your raw, unfinished thoughts. You might find yourself deleting a draft 3 times before you send it, staying silent in a room of people because you are terrified of saying the wrong thing, or smiling politely while feeling a dry, hollow ache of inadequacy deep within your chest. Perhaps you have spent your years polishing a brilliant, highly capable persona to hide the simple, beautiful truth that you do not always know the way. When we live in this constant state of defensive self-preservation, we are like a person who possesses a beautiful white paper fan but refuses to ever open it. Fearing that the wind will smudge its pristine folds, we remain dry, stiff, and increasingly isolated, sacrificing our natural capacity to breathe and connect just to maintain a safe, unblemished stillness. Tonight, let the physical weight of your bones sink fully into the quiet, firm wood of this veranda, letting go of the constant pressure to paint a perfect picture of your life. There is no requirement for you to find the right words to explain your heart before the morning arrives, and you do not have to prove that you are flawless to deserve a peaceful mind. If it feels right, you might allow your focus to rest on the gentle, slow expansion of your ribcage as it meets the quiet air of the room. Imagine placing your heavy lacquer box down on the dark floorboards beside you, leaving its lid completely open so that the cool, damp night breeze can reach the quiet space within. You are safe enough in this dark shelter to let your jaw relax, without needing to justify your quiet presence to the night. The dry, locked tightness in your collarbones is simply the physical record of all the hours you spent trying to keep your spirit perfectly still and unexposed. You can let that structural strain drop now, letting your collarbones widen, letting your forehead soften, and letting the tiny muscles around your mouth relax into the quiet dark. We are not asking you to suddenly feel completely confident, nor are we demanding that you display your raw, unpolished self to the world tonight. We are simply stepping together onto a wide, dark veranda, where the rain is soft, the bamboo is strong, and the blank paper can remain completely unpainted without any need to justify its empty space. You are permitted to let the pleats of your mind lie folded or unfolded exactly as they are, without any pressure to perform. When we look closely at our habit of self-preservation, we see how much tender, protective love is hidden behind our fear of making a mistake. We believe that if we never show our unpolished edges, we can never be cast aside, and if we keep our thoughts permanently hidden, we can never experience the pain of being misunderstood. This constant vigilance keeps our neck stiff and our throat dry, making the body feel as though it must stand as a rigid wooden frame in a storm. But your spirit was never designed to be an ornamental piece kept under lock and key. Your heart is like a wide open fan, designed by nature to catch the wild wind of life, allowing the breezes of experience to pass through your spaces without leaving a single permanent stain. Let the physical weight of your limbs sink fully into the quiet wood beneath your hips, letting each joint drop its protective duty, one small area at a time. Your lungs can open, your stomach can soften without any restriction, and your breath can move like a slow, quiet mist that has no need to explain its path through the wild plum trees. You do not have to solve the puzzle of your worth tonight, and you do not have to draw the perfect lines of your future before the morning arrives. For now, it is entirely enough to be a simple blank presence resting in a dark room, completely free from the pressure to open. In the next part of our journey, we will travel to a quiet temple courtyard where a young calligrapher learned the true, freeing power of setting his unpainted fan down on the wet grass, letting the mountain wind do the work. Let your mind drift quietly now, leaving the familiar shore of your immediate worries and traveling back into a time of quiet simplicity. We are entering the high temple gardens of the Bloomist Peak, where the mountain terrace overlooks a deep valley filled with wild plum trees. The air here is thin, cool, and sharp, with the fragrance of wet leaves, green plum blossoms, and the earthy scent of clean rainwater soaking into dark loam. In this high sanctuary, a young apprentice named Junpei lived in a small, drafty wooden shelter at the edge of the stone steps. Junpei was a calligrapher of remarkable promise, his eyes sharp and his posture disciplined, but his heart was constantly weighed down by a silent, paralyzing fear. He believed that his worth as an artist rested entirely on his ability to produce lines of absolute, unblemished perfection. To Junpei, every blank page was not an invitation, but a terrifying threat to his safety. He would spend hours preparing his charcoal ink, grinding the dark stone slab with slow, agonizing care, while staring at the empty white sheets before him. His hand would freeze over the paper, his fingers locking around the chiffre brush with a rigid, white-knuckled grip that made his forearm ache with a dull pain. He would imagine the ink splattering, a stroke falling too thick, or his hand trembling on the soft paper, ruining the pristine surface forever. This constant mental forecasting of disaster made his breathing shallow, and it left him feeling completely stuck, unable to lay down a single real mark of his soul. The height of his anxiety arrived when the head monk gifted him a rare, beautiful folding fan. This object was made of 12 delicate ribs of split green bamboo, over which was stretched a single sheet of unpainted, pure white rice paper. The paper was so thin and clean that it seemed to glow with its own internal light, holding the faint, clean scent of fresh rice paste and raw wood. Junpei was instructed to paint a simple plum branch on its surface, a task meant to honor the arrival of the summer rains. But the moment Junpei touched the smooth bamboo ribs, his chest tightened with a suffocating dread. The paper felt too fragile, too perfect, and too precious to survive his clumsy, imperfect touch. Rather than risk making an imperfect stroke, Junpei carried the white fan into his small room, wrapped it in a soft piece of blue cotton, and locked it deep inside a dark cedar chest. He believed that by keeping the fan closed and hidden from the light, he was protecting its beauty from the harsh elements of the world. He kept the key in his sash, checking the lock multiple times a day. While his heart grew increasingly cold and heavy, he sat in his dark corner, watching the other apprentices paint their simple, uneven characters on rough scrolls, secretly envying their freedom while feeling a deep, bitter shame of his own frozen safety. He was protecting his fan, but he was also slowly suffocating his own creative spirit. In the quiet courtyard of the temple, a wise old gardener named Sister Shizuko spent her days sweeping the fallen plum blossoms from the stone pathways. Shizuko was a woman of immense quiet presence, her gray linen robes weathered by the mountain wind and her face carrying the deep, peaceful silence of the cliffs. She did not paint scrolls, and she did not give long lectures on the scriptures. She simply moved through the garden with an unhurried, grounded grace, her bamboo broom clearing the stones with a slow, rhythmic rustle that sounded like the breath of the mountain itself. She had watched the young calligrapher check his cedar chest day after day, noting the painful stiffness in his shoulders and the dry, locked tightness in his throat. One night, a great summer storm swept over the Bloomist Peak, bringing a wild, howling wind that rattled the wooden paper screens of the temple. The rain came down in heavy sheets, washing over the tiled roofs and filling the stone basins to overflowing with cool, clean water. Junpei sat in his dark room, his ears ringing with the roar of the wind, his hands pressed tightly against his ears to drown out the noise. He felt incredibly small, terrified that the storm would break his screens and ruin the precious cedar chest where his perfect fan lay hidden. A quiet tap on his wooden sliding door broke through his panic. He opened it to find Sister Shizuko standing on the wet veranda, her gray robes damp from the spray and her white hair shining in the dark. She did not look afraid of the storm, and she did not ask him to help her secure the garden. Instead, she reached out her hand, her fingers smelling of wet plum bark and fresh pine needles, and gestured toward his room. "Bring the white fan," she said, her voice carrying the slow, steady vibration of the wind. Junpei hesitated, his heart hammering against his ribs in a sudden surge of fear. He protested that the storm was too wild, that the wind would tear the delicate paper, and that the rain would ruin the clean white folds of his treasure. But Shizuko simply stood there, her gaze calm, steady, and filled with a profound, quiet compassion that made his excuses feel incredibly thin. Trembling, he unlocked the cedar chest, pulled out the wrapped fan, and followed her out onto the wide, open terrace. The wind on the terrace was fierce, howling through the pine boughs and sending cold drops of rain across their faces. Junpei clutched the wrapped fan to his chest, his whole body shaking with a rapid, defensive vibration. Shizuko walked to the very edge of the stone steps, where the mountain wind rose directly from the deep valley below. She turned to him, her eyes bright in the dark. "Unfold the paper," she commanded quietly. Junpei cried out that the wind would destroy it, but Shizuko reached out and gently laid her hand over his trembling wrists. Her touch was not forceful, but it possessed the solid, unmoving weight of the mountain itself, inviting his muscles to drop their rigid self-protection. With a slow, halting movement, Junpei unclasped the small lacquer hook. At the base of the fan, he spread his fingers, letting the 12 ribs of green bamboo swing open, exposing the wide, blank sheet of white paper directly to the roaring storm. He braced himself for the paper to rip, waiting for the fragile folds to tear away and vanish into the dark valley. But as the fan opened fully, a beautiful, unexpected thing happened. The white paper did not tear, and the bamboo ribs did not snap. Instead, the wide, blank fan caught the full force of the mountain gale, its hollow folds humming with a deep, resonant tone that sounded like a giant bronze bell. The wind passed smoothly over the flat, unpainted surface, lifting the weight of the heavy paper and carrying the storm's energy harmlessly away through the open spaces. Sister Shizuko looked at the young calligrapher, her face softening into a gentle, knowing smile as the rain fell around them. "Does the wind ask for a drawing before it agrees to sing through the bamboo?" she asked him, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. A sudden, deep wave of emotional recognition washed through Junpei's chest, the rigid tightness in his jaw and the locked ache in his collarbones finally beginning to dissolve. He looked at the wide, blank fan in his hands, seeing how beautifully it rode the wild currents of the storm, completely undamaged by the very wind he had feared would destroy it. He realized for the first time that his constant, exhausting attempt to protect the fan was not an act of love, but his own desperate desire to remain safe from the natural wild movements of life. He had locked his own spirit in a dark box, believing that an unpainted, unused life was better than an imperfect one. He stood on the wet stone steps, letting the cool wind pass over his bare face, as the vast dark mountain garden filled with the clean smell of wet plum blossoms, and the silent, beautiful realization that his blankness was already complete. This quiet, grounding realization on the wet stone terrace is not a lesson about forcing yourself to feel nothing at all. It does not ask you to turn your mind into a frozen block of wood that is completely indifferent to the natural desires of the heart. The deep, soothing wisdom of the unfolded paper is pointing to a much softer, more compassionate truth. It shows us that our deepest, most exhausting suffering does not rise from the simple, raw difficulties that life naturally brings to our door. The original discomfort of a mistakes, the quiet sting of a project that did not work out, or the natural fatigue of a mind that is simply tired of trying so hard, is like the cool, damp rain that naturally falls over the high plum trees. This initial dampness is a simple, unavoidable reality of being alive in a world where things are constantly shifting. The plum trees do not feel angry at the storm for scattering their blossoms, and the wide granite steps do not try to dry their own stones with fire. They simply accept the moisture as a natural part of their quiet existence. But in our human lives, we often believe that we must remain completely unblemished, perfect, and untouched by difficulty to be worthy of our space. We feel the cold touch of an unpolished, raw season, and we immediately react with a deep, systemic panic. We do not just feel the natural fatigue of our journey. We begin to tell ourselves stories about our unpainted state, believing that our lack of a finished design is a sign of a fundamentally ruined spirit that will never be accepted by the world. This secondary reaction is where our true suffering is born, as we lock our raw self away in a dark cedar chest, trying to force our unique shape to remain safe from the wind. Our true weariness begins when we try to protect our delicate image through sheer mental effort. We tell ourselves that if we can just polish our exterior a little more, or hide our doubts a little deeper, we can keep our world completely pristine. We turn our thoughts into a rigid, defensive fortress. We lock our attention onto the expectations of those around us, trying to maintain a perfect, flawless pace. This frantic desire to control how we are seen is what we call attachment. It is the desperate, white-knuckled need to keep our emotional pleats tightly closed. But this forced safety does not actually preserve our strength. It only creates a suffocating, painful pressure that wears our own inner fibers down, leaving us empty, isolated, and increasingly numb. Consider the immense physical effort it takes to hold a fragile folding fan in a tight grip while forcing it to remain closed against a great mountain gale. Your knuckles must remain constantly clenched. Your shoulders must remain locked, and your whole body must freeze in a rigid posture of frantic resistance. This is exactly what we do to our spirits when we refuse to let our life move at its own natural, unpolished depth. We spend our days and our nights holding the heavy lid of our expectations in a tight vice, terrified that if we let go for a single second, we will be ruined by the wind of judgment. We turn our very identity into that of an ornament, watching the reactions of others with a hypervigilant eye, constantly measuring our own value by how flawless we appear. This constant comparative vigilance is what we call suffering. It is not the presence of the wild, unpainted paper, but the exhausting struggle to pretend we do not have our own raw edges to carry. We believe that if we can just remain folded inside our dark box, we can build a sanctuary that is entirely free from the slow, messy reality of our own growth. But there is no box in the world that can keep out the natural flow of change. And the more we try to force ourselves into a static, flawless pattern, the more we isolate our spirit from the natural, healing currents of our own truth. We become like Junpei's locked fan, stiff on the outside and dry on the inside, because we have cut ourselves off from the circulating, spacious wind of our own unpainted life. This gentle understanding completely redefines what it means to heal. True healing is not about becoming a perfect painted screen that can never be scratched or worn down by the rain. It is the willing softness of the wide, blank paper. The open fan does not fight the storm. It lets the wind pass smoothly over its flat surface, remaining completely integrated with the quiet night around it. It does not pretend the gale is not there. It simply refuses to hold onto the force, letting the air move with a quiet, resonant tone that carries no resistance and leaves no raw wounds behind. By allowing your boundaries to become soft and porous tonight, you are not making yourself weak. You are simply letting the heavy, trapped heat of your self-protection circulate and clear. When we translate the ancient teachings of awareness into our daily emotional life, we see that it is simply the practice of unfolding. It is the quiet willingness to let our thoughts rise and fall, without trying to force them through a pre-carved track. We stop treating our unpolished places as a dangerous defect that must be instantly corrected through intense self-criticism. We learn to sit quietly on the wooden veranda of our own chest, watching the gray fog of our anxiety drift through our branches without trying to sweep it away. This soft, receptive attention is what the sages call compassion. It is the gentle space we offer to our own raw fibers, letting the weariness exist without trying to fix it through shame. You do not have to become a perfectly decorated guide tonight, and you do not have to throw away your fragile folds. The protective habits you have built over the years were created out of a very deep, tender love for your own safety. They were built by a part of you that was simply trying to survive a season of intense comparison and cold self-doubt. We can honor that defensive guard without letting it run our lives forever. We can gently tell ourselves that the storm is not an enemy, and that the ground is finally safe enough for us to loosen our grip. We can let the heavy lid of our chest spring open, allowing the wide, blank paper of our spirit to catch the cool wind. Imagine the immense relief of letting your throat and your stomach soften, dropping the heavy weight of your self-protection. You do not have to prove that you are completely healed or perfectly decorated before you are allowed to sleep. You are permitted to let your boundaries be soft, letting your current exhaustion meet the quiet, misty air of this room. The darkness outside your window does not demand that you explain your unpainted spaces. The night is already holding your tired frame, accepting your uncarved path without asking for a single word of justification. Let your breathing remain slow and natural, letting the soft tide of the air carry away the heavy, trapped heat of your comparison. As you rest here in the quiet safety of your room, let the realization settle into your heart that you are not separate from the wider world. The boxes you have tried so hard to lock yourself into are just temporary structures, made of simple wood that will eventually return to the damp forest floor. You do not have to carry the burden of your isolation alone, and you do not have to turn your spirit into iron to remain safe. For now, it is entirely enough to let your breath move like a quiet, warm wind through your empty spaces, connecting your quiet paper to the vast, peaceful darkness of the night. In the next part of our journey, we will practice a gentle, somatic meditation, learning how to slowly release the tight grip that has kept our inner world folded away for so long. If it feels right, you might allow your awareness to settle very gently into the quiet, physical reality of your own chest and your rib cage. There is absolutely no need to adjust your physical posture in this dark room, and you do not need to sit up to begin this practice. Perhaps you can simply feel the cool, steady support of the mattress beneath your shoulders and your hips. Even noticing the subtle, soft weight of the air as it touches your forehead is a beautiful way to begin. There is no requirement for your mind to be completely free of thoughts right now, and you do not have to banish a single worry to find your way into this quiet space. We are simply sitting at the edge of our own physical presence, letting the heavy weight of the day's guarded postures settle into the quiet earth. Perhaps you might pay attention to the natural, unhurried flow of the air as it passes through your throat and into your lungs. There is no need to take deep, calculated breaths that create a tight tension in your ribs. Let your chest expand in its own time, like the quiet, damp mist moving through the wet plum trees outside the veranda. Each soft inhalation brings a cool, spacious comfort to the back of your neck, easing the tight pressure behind your jaw. Each soft exhalation carries away a tiny fragment of the heat you have carried in your collarbones. If your breathing feels a little shallow or uneven tonight, there is absolutely no need to correct it. Even noticing the shallow quality of a breath is enough to bring your awareness back to the present. We are not trying to force the air to be perfect, but simply allowing ourselves to be breathed by the quiet night. As you rest here, you might notice a specific thought or a lingering worry about how you present yourself to the world. Perhaps a memory of a day spent hiding your doubts or trying to speak with absolute, unblemished correctness will float into the quiet clearing of your mind. Do not try to push this thought away, and do not try to fix the feeling of being unpainted or unprepared. You can simply watch it rise like a small puff of steam in the cool mountain air. If it feels right, you might quietly name the emotional pattern that has taken hold of your chest. You can tell yourself that this is the habit of the locked cedar box. This is the old, weary desire to keep your raw self tightly folded and hidden from the wind. Just naming this pattern brings a soft, spacious distance to the heavy worry. Now, if it feels right, you might visualize yourself standing once again on the wide, dark wooden veranda, surrounded by the scent of wet plum blossoms and damp earth. In your hands, you are holding the quiet frame of a folding fan. You can feel the 12 delicate ribs of split green bamboo, and you can feel the clean, unpainted rice paper stretched across the folds. This fan carries the weight of all your expectations, your self-defense, and your exhausting struggles to keep your inner life hidden from judgment. You do not have to paint a perfect picture on its surface tonight, and you do not have to prove that you are ready to open it. Perhaps you might visualize yourself gently letting the small lacquer hook at the base of the fan swing free. With each slow, easy inhalation, imagine the 12 bamboo ribs gently parting, letting the folding pleats of the white paper widen. You do not have to throw it open with a sudden, dramatic gesture. Perhaps you can simply let the paper expand naturally, matching the quiet, slow rise of your own collarbones. As the fan opens fully, let the image of its blank, white surface rest in your mind. See how the clean paper does not require a drawing to be complete. It is already spacious, light, and perfectly unblemished, designed by nature to let the cool night wind pass across its folds. The wind of the storm does not rip the paper. It simply passes over the flat, open surface, lifting the heavy weight of your self-protection and carrying the tension harmlessly away into the dark forest. Whenever you are ready, you can gently let these images dissolve back into the quiet shadows of your mind. Return your focus to the physical safety of the room where you are resting. Feel the quiet, solid support of your bed holding your hips, your shoulders, and your limbs. The mattress is cradling your frame without asking for any balance, requiring no effort to remain upright. The air around you is still and cool, carrying no competitive expectations and no demands for you to prove your worth. Your fingers are lying empty and soft against your sheets, completely freed from the tight, white-knuckled grip on the lock. You have set the heavy cedar box down, allowing your body to sink into the unhurried, peaceful present. There is no need to force a complete unfolding of your spirit tonight, and you do not have to decide how you will present your heart tomorrow. Even noticing the subtle softening of the muscles in your jaw is a profound step toward your own inner peace. You are fully permitted to let your chest feel heavy, and you are allowed to let your weariness rest in the quiet dark. The plum trees do not demand that their blossoms open in a single second. The flowers bloom in their own time, petal by petal, under a quiet, patient sky. Let your breath remain slow, natural, and completely quiet as the vast, dark night holds your tired spirit. Perhaps you can feel the quiet weight of your blanket pressing down on your limbs like a warm, protective hand of cedar wood. This weight is different from the stiff, rigid tension of your daily self-preservation. It is a comforting, stable boundary that reminds you that you are entirely safe in this room. You do not have to defend your unpainted spaces against the coming day, and you do not have to draw any lines to prove that you are worthy. The stillness of the night is already holding you, accepting your raw, unpolished form without asking for a single word of explanation. You can let your awareness drift further and further down, entering the quiet, porous depths of your own being. Notice if there is any remaining tightness in your fingers, your jaw, or the back of your neck. If it feels right, Imagine that this stiffness is like a tiny crease in the paper. You do not have to flatten it with force, and you do not have to fight the tension. You can simply allow the cool, damp mist of your breath to wash over this area, letting the tightness soften in its own time. The quiet fibers of your body know how to absorb this gentle attention, and they know how to relax when the environment is ready. There is no hurry, and there is no obligation to resolve a single doubt before you let your eyes close. You are permitted to be exactly as you are in this silent, dark sanctuary. With each slow, unhurried breath, you might feel a gentle, wave-like sensation moving through your torso. This movement is like the soft wind of the forest, flowing quietly through the deep valley to let the plum trees breathe. It is a slow, rhythmic current of life that moves without any assistance from your active thoughts. You do not have to steer this flow, and you do not have to worry about where your path is heading. You are safe enough to trust the quiet, uncarved stone of your life tonight, allowing your thoughts to drift like loose petals on the water. The air is cool, the world is quiet, and you are permitted to rest. Let the quiet silence of the room absorb the last, faint vibrations of your physical effort. There are no expectations to satisfy in this dim sanctuary, and there are no judges to please before the morning arrives. The future is still resting under a blanket of quiet, cool mist, and the past has already dissolved into the damp forest floor. You are here in this very second, a simple breathing presence that has survived the heaviest storms of the year. Let your eyelids become heavy, letting your spirit sink into the vast, protective dark of the night, knowing that your unpainted fan is completely safe to rest. If your spirit is willing, let your quiet thoughts travel deeper into the high, rocky country, entering a dry, silent stone hearthroom built on the northern slope of the peak. The air up here is thin, crisp, and fragrant with a sharp smell of dry cedar wood, bitter yellow bark, and the clean metallic aroma of cold ash. In this quiet gray shelter, a young silk painter named Kenzo worked beside a large stone fire pit. Kenzo was a craftsman of extraordinary patience, but his chest was constantly filled with a heavy, vibrating panic. He had been given the rare responsibility of constructing the great white ceremonial kites that would be flown over the valley to mark the changing of the seasons. To Kenzo, this duty was not a joyous craft, but a terrifying test of his ultimate worthiness. He believed that the silk of the kite must remain completely white, pristine, and untouched by a single speck of dust or smoke. Otherwise, the ancestors would look down in deep disappointment. This paralyzing fear of exposure and mess dictated his every single movement. He spent his days sitting on the stone floor, his back perfectly straight, holding a bare, unpainted white silk kite frame in his lap with a rigid, defensive stiffness. The kite was made of light, split mountain bamboo, over which was stretched a single sheet of fine, unpainted white silk. The weave of the silk was so clean, delicate, and open that it looked like a thin layer of winter ice. Kenzo would stare at the white silk until his eyes burned with exhaustion, his heart hammering against his ribs at the mere thought of a single speck of soot landing on its surface. He kept a high wooden screen between his work table and the stone hearth, terrified that the rising heat of the fire would carry a dark mark of charcoal up to the pristine white fabric. This constant, anxious vigilance had become a suffocating weight. Because he was so terrified of spoiling the silk, Kenzo had kept his finished frames stacked in a dark, dry cabinet, never allowing them to be taken out into the open sky. He believed that by keeping the silk frames hidden in the dark, he was protecting their pure essence from the harsh, unpredictable elements of the mountain. But the temple keepers were beginning to whisper about his constant delays, and his chest felt increasingly dry, hollow and tight with a painful sense of failure. He was protecting his creations from the smoke, but he was also slowly suffocating his own capacity to let them fly. Beside the stone hearth sat an elder mountain monk named Master Miyoko, who spent his days tending the slow, smoldering charcoal embers. Miyoko was a man of immense quiet patience, his shoulders broad and slightly curved from 40 years of carrying the heavy cedar logs, and his face carrying the calm, steady silence of the cliffs. He did not paint, and he did not give long lectures on the nature of purity. He simply sat on a low wooden bench, his worn, calloused hands resting on his knees as he watched the young silk painter work in his state of rigid, frozen self-protection. He saw how Kenzo's body had become completely stiff, his fingers trembling whenever they touched the delicate white silk, his mind entirely trapped in the fear of a single irreversible smudge. On a cold, windswept evening, when the mountain wind was howling through the cedar shingles, Kenzo stood before his cabinet, his hands shaking as he reached for the most precious white kite frame he had ever constructed. The temple festival was scheduled for the following morning, and he knew he could no longer hide his work in the dark. As he pulled the light bamboo frame from the shelf, a sudden sharp gust of wind blew through a crack in the wooden screen, catching the edge of the silk. The frame slipped from his fingers, falling directly toward the dusty floorboards near the stone hearth. Kenzo gasped, his throat tightening with a sudden, suffocating panic, as he lunged forward to catch the falling frame. He managed to grab the bamboo rib just before it touched the floor, but as his hand swiped through the air, his sleeve brushed against the edge of the stone fire pit, sending a small cloud of light gray ash rising into the air. Kenzo watched in absolute horror as several tiny dark specks of soot floated upward, settling directly onto the center of the unpainted white silk. The pristine fabric was now marred by 3 small, distinct gray marks that stood out like dark scars against the white surface. He felt a sudden, crushing wave of helplessness, realizing that his worst fear had finally come to pass. His perfect, unblemished creation was ruined, and he had failed the temple. He sank onto the stone floor, his chest heaving with short, painful gasps of deep shame, his hands covering his face to hide his tears from the old monk. He expected Master Mayoko to shake his head in silent disapproval, or perhaps to tell him how to scrub the silk with vinegar. But the elder hearthkeeper did not utter a single word of judgment, and he did not reach for a cloth to clean the frame. Instead, Mayoko rose slowly from his low wooden bench, his boots crunching quietly on the dry cedar shavings as he walked over to the weeping painter. With a slow, deliberate movement, Mayoko reached down and picked up the scarred white kite frame. He did not try to brush the soot away, nor did he try to hide the dark marks. He carried the light bamboo frame directly to the center of the stone fire pit, holding the wide, open sheet of white silk directly over the rising columns of hot, smoking air. Kenzo cried out in panic, begging him to pull the kite away, believing that the thick, hot smoke of the hearth would blacken the entire frame and ruin it beyond any hope of repair. But Mayoko held his hand steady, his weathered face completely unruffled as he gestured for the young man to look closer. "Watch the weave," Miyoko murmured, his voice carrying the deep, steady resonance of the mountain wind. Kenzo hesitated, his heart hammering against his ribs, but he forced himself to look at the silk. As the hot, smoky air rose from the embers, it did not blacken the white fabric. Because the silk was woven so light, open, and delicate, the rising heat of the hearth passed smoothly and harmlessly straight through the tiny, open spaces of the weave. The fabric did not catch the soot, and it did not turn dark. The 3 small specks of ash that had fallen earlier remained on the surface, but they did not spread. They were simply tiny, quiet marks of the hearth, completely surrounded by a vast, open space of clean white silk that continued to let the hot air pass through without a single tremor of resistance. A sudden, deep wave of emotional recognition washed through Kenzo's chest, the rigid, protective tightness in his collarbones finally beginning to dissolve. He looked at the wide, open silk frame riding the hot air of the hearth, seeing how beautifully it let the smoke pass through its spaces, completely undamaged by the very element he had feared would destroy it. He realized for the first time that his daily agony was not caused by the presence of the smoke or the fragility of his silk. He had been trying to turn his living, breathing creations into solid, impenetrable walls of ice, believing that if they could not block out every speck of the world, they were completely worthless. He saw that the silk was beautiful precisely because it was open, porous, and designed by nature to let the air pass through its spaces. His own heart was not a fragile painting that had to be kept under lock and key, but a wide, open weave that was fully capable of letting the winds of life pass through without leaving a single permanent stain of suffering. The young silk painter did not suddenly become a fearless master of his craft in a single night. His hands were still slightly tired, and the memory of his near failure still carried a quiet, dull ache behind his ribs. But as the fire began to die down into a soft red glow, Kenzo made one small, quiet shift in his daily discipline. He did not throw his ruined frame away, and he did not try to scrub the soot from the fabric. He took a slow, unhurried breath, let his locked shoulders drop, and gently carried his white kite out onto the wide-open veranda. He stopped treating his anxious thoughts of inadequacy as absolute truth, letting go of the need to protect his work from the sky. He held the light frame up into the cool, damp night wind, watching the unpainted white silk catch the mountain breeze and rise slowly, steadily, and beautifully into the dark, starless air as the silent slope filled with the clean smell of wet cedar and the deep, healing realization that he was finally free to let his spirit fly. If you are willing, let the cool night air move fully across your collarbones, finding that quiet internal room where your old habits of self-preservation have been stored. This internal space is not a place that needs to be cleared of every difficult thought before you are allowed to sleep. When we look closely at our chronic worry, we can often feel the immense, silent weight of self-judgment that keeps our body locked in a permanent, protective stance. We stand before the blank canvas of our lives, staring at the empty spaces where we could speak, act, or create, and we treat our fear of failure as a personal flaw. We tell ourselves that if we were only wiser, stronger, or more capable, we would never experience this heavy, locked tightness in our jaw, and we would never feel this dry, hollow ache of inadequacy. We try to cure our deep sensitivity by punishing ourselves with shame, believing that if we are critical enough of our own hesitation, we can force our minds to become perfectly clear. This is the hidden, painful cycle of our daily suffering, an internal habit where the mind turns its own sensitivity into a heavy, exhausting cage. We spend our evenings rehearsing future scenarios in the dark, trying to predict every possible mistake so we can prevent ourselves from ever feeling the sting of a cold look. We replay our past slips over and over, tracing the jagged scars of old failures in our minds, and we use those old memories to make ourselves feel small, behind, and completely inadequate. We seek the constant approval of others, hoping that their validation will act as a solid, permanent shield that will keep us from ever getting lost in the storm. We become so terrified of making a wrong turn that we freeze, turning our very hesitation into our identity, defining ourselves as someone who is permanently stuck, unable to move forward, and destined to remain in the shadows. But ancient Buddhist wisdom offers a beautiful, comforting distinction between the simple, natural difficulties that life brings and the extra suffering our own minds add through resistance. The world will always present us with raw, unpainted stone, sudden storms, and the genuine, painful necessity of acting without knowing how our steps will end. This is the first kind of pain, a simple, unavoidable reality of being a human traveler in a world that is constantly shifting its weather. It is like the cold, thick mountain fog that naturally rolls over the high pass, swallowing the trails and blurring the edges of the trees. We cannot stop the mist from arriving, and we cannot force the peaks to reveal their secrets before we are ready. This initial confusion is not a personal failure, and it is not a sign that your life is broken. It is simply the natural landscape of a mind that is alive, feeling, and sensitive to the mystery of the journey. To understand how we multiply this pain, imagine a traveler who is given a beautifully light unpainted paper screen to carry across a narrow mountain pass. As they walk, a sudden cold gust of wind naturally sweeps down the gorge, causing the paper to rattle and bend slightly in the draft. This is the simple, natural movement of the journey, an unavoidable effect of the wind and the high altitude. But the traveler becomes so terrified of letting a single wrinkle form on the clean white surface that they begin to coat the paper in thick layers of heavy pine tar. The stiffened, blackened screen, the rapid loss of its light flexibility, the intense muscular strain of carrying its new weight, and the inevitable tearing of the brittle frame under the next gust of wind are not caused by the mountain draft. This extra heaviness is created entirely by the traveler's frantic, desperate struggle to force the paper to remain completely untouched while they are still in the middle of the crossing. In the very same way, our deepest emotional suffering does not rise from our raw, unpainted places, but from the hard, defensive tars we use to coat them. When we experience a moment of deep vulnerability, our inner paper naturally feels the cold pressure of a wind, But because we are terrified of being seen as flawed or inadequate, we immediately try to harden ourselves, wrapping our hearts in the thick, dry wax of our self-criticism. We use shame to punish our tired minds, telling ourselves that we should not feel so heavy, or that we must remain completely unaffected by the progress of others. This rapid, defensive tightening is what keeps our inner space in a state of permanent, painful restriction, preventing the delicate pleats of our awareness from ever finding their natural, quiet alignment with the night wind. True peace does not arrive because you have successfully turned your life into a solid block of flawless granite that can never be scratched, aged, or worn down by the weather. True peace is found when you radically change your relationship with your own emotional vulnerability, learning to let your raw, unpainted silk absorb the draft of the mountain without any fear of ruin. Instead of wrapping your raw, aching collarbones in the thick oilcloth of your self-criticism, you can learn to let your empty spaces be cleared by the quiet, spacious warmth of gentle awareness. This quiet, non-judgmental presence acts as a natural open window for your spirit, allowing the natural wear of your journey to pass slowly, evenly, and without creating a single drop of friction in your mind. When we practice this soft, receptive presence, we stop treating our existing physical limits as a source of personal shame. We begin to understand that our hesitation, our raw places, and our changing strength are not signs of a failed map, but simply the beautiful, open weave where the wind of compassion can finally pass through. You do not have to hide your empty spaces behind a thick, heavy mask of absolute self-reliance, and you do not have to prove that you are completely flawless to deserve a place by the fire. Like the seasoned, open silk frames of the high hearth, your body is fully capable of holding the most intense warmth, provided you allow it to breathe without any protective wrapping. By offering yourself this quiet clearing tonight, you are letting the hard, rigid edges of your defenses soften back into the warm earth. Let the physical weight of your bones sink fully into the quiet space of this bed, letting go of the constant, weary struggle to map out your future. The air in your room is still, cool, and peaceful, free from the heavy demands of the daytime world where you must always appear decisive, confident, and strong. You do not have to be the unyielding guide of your journey tonight, and you do not have to decide how you will present your heart to the world tomorrow. You are fully allowed to be an unpainted, open space, resting in the dark, letting the quiet warmth of your own breathing heal the deep, invisible fractures of your day. The universe is entirely capable of holding the crossroads without your active help, and you are completely safe to let your tired head rest in the vast, unhurried dark. As you continue to drift closer to the edge of sleep, let the realization settle into your chest that you have never been truly separate from the elements of the world. The boxes you built in your mind to isolate yourself from the risk of making mistakes are just temporary structures made of simple wood that will eventually return to the damp forest floor. You do not have to survive the storm alone, and you do not have to turn your spirit into iron to remain secure. For now, it is entirely enough to let your breath move like a quiet, warm draft, connecting the quiet paper of your chest to the vast, peaceful darkness of the night. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how we can carry this soft, radiant warmth into the busy, challenging moments of our modern daily lives. Technical line, delivery, part 7 of 8. This quiet, unpainted wisdom of the open silk weave and the blank paper fan is not meant to remain hidden in a remote mountain hearth. It is designed to find its way directly into the busy, cluttered landscape of your modern daily existence. We do not spend our winter mornings constructing split bamboo frames, and we do not carry hand-finished silk kites through the misty cedar groves. Yet we live with the exact same freezing tension whenever we sit in the dim light of our bedrooms, staring at the small, glowing screen of our phone. We wait for a specific text message to arrive, checking the glass surface over and over again, with a quiet, suffocating panic in our chest. We are hoping that a single word from another person will act as a sudden, smooth seal to validate our worth, giving us permission to feel safe. In these anxious moments, we are behaving exactly like a frantic painter. We are trying to force a permanent, flawless certainty onto a moment that is naturally open and uncarved. We carry this rigid, defensive posture when we walk through our busy days, wearing a bright, pleasant smile while carrying a heavy, cold mass of unshed fatigue deep within our chest. We pretend to be completely fine, convincing ourselves that our raw, unfinished thoughts are a shameful defect we must hide from the world. We look at the achievements of those around us, comparing our quiet, unwritten season to the loud, vibrant drawings of their visible success. We tell ourselves that we have fallen behind, that we should be more productive, and that our life should be in full, glorious blossom by now. This constant, painful comparison is like trying to coat our delicate paper screen in thick, heavy layers of pine tar. We are trying to force our unique, flexible spirit to live inside a rigid shell of absolute correctness, even if the heavy weight of that defense suffocates our capacity to breathe. When the evening comes, we carry this exhausting weight into our beds, lying awake for hours while our minds replay a minor mistake we made during the day. We examine each word we spoke, wishing we could reach back into the dark to erase every imperfect stroke of our tongue. This endless spinning replay is not a helpful way to learn, but rather a cold, relentless wind of self-criticism that freezes our sensitive spirit. We are refusing to let our unpainted silk absorb the natural cool draft of our humanness, trying to force ourselves to remain completely untouched by the world. This demand for absolute perfection only makes our inner fibers more brittle, leaving us vulnerable to tearing the very next time our life takes an unexpected turn. We experience this same suffocating freeze when we try to tightly manage and control the relationships in our lives. We are terrified of the cold void of uncertainty, and so we try to secure our connections by making them permanent, rigid, and completely predictable. We want the people we love to never change, to never pull away, and to never experience their own winter seasons of silence. This anxious, gripping care is like trying to bind our silk frame to the stone hearth with a thick iron wire. We only succeed in strangling the life out of the connection, preventing the soft fabric from absorbing the natural, refreshing air of human emotion. True love is not a rigid cage of ice. It is the wide open weave that allows every draft of feeling to pass through its spaces without leaving a single permanent mark of suffering. The path of practical transformation begins with one small, quiet choice to let your inner season be exactly as it is right now. When you feel a sudden wave of sadness, or when a quiet memory of what you have lost threatens to bring tears to your eyes, you can practice the quiet art of yielding. You do not have to brush the dampness off your skin in a panic, and you do not have to force yourself to smile to make others comfortable. You can simply allow your throat and your diaphragm to soften, letting the cold air of your grief pool quietly in the center of your chest. This gentle pause is like placing your unpainted paper fan on the wide, dark floorboards of the veranda. You are choosing to let your feelings expand slowly, naturally, and at their own pace, without trying to force them over the fire of your own shame. You can also practice this soft, yielding presence when you find yourself wanting to rest but feeling a heavy, nagging sense of guilt for doing nothing. We have been conditioned to believe that our worth is measured entirely by how much we can produce, and that a quiet, inactive season is a sign of personal failure. But the wise gardeners remind us that stillness is not a waste of time. It is a sacred, necessary gathering of resources. The paper must remain completely blank during the dark hours, sleeping in the silent cedar box so it can reflect the clean light of the stars. You do not have to earn your rest by exhausting yourself completely first. Your quiet, unlit moments are the very soil that nourishes the green growth of your future. Tomorrow, when you feel the pressure to be perfectly strong and untouched by the changes of your life, remember the lessons of the high hearth. You do not have to turn your heart into an unyielding block of iron to survive the cold. When an unexpected storm arrives, you can choose to let your branches bow close to the ground, letting the heavy rain of reality rest quietly against your bark without trying to fight its weight. You can choose to stop treating your anxious, frantic thoughts of failure as absolute truth, allowing your mind to rest in the spacious, quiet dark of the present. By offering yourself this gentle, non-judgmental clearing, you are letting your tired spirit return to its natural, resilient rhythm. As you lie here in the safety of this room, let these practical reflections dissolve into a quiet, comforting stillness that requires no active memory. The busy, demanding day has closed its heavy doors, and the paths of the world have grown dark and quiet. You do not have to write any solutions to your problems in the silence of the night, and you do not have to decide how you will rebuild your boundaries tomorrow. Your empty hands are resting softly on the sheets, completely freed from the constant, weary struggle to manage your own life. You are permitted to be exactly as you are, a quiet, feeling human being who is safe enough to let the mountain do its silent, necessary work. The wild plum trees outside your window are resting under a peaceful, dark sky, their green leaves bowing gracefully under the gentle pressure of the night wind. They do not worry about when the summer will arrive, and they do not feel guilty for letting their white blossoms sleep in the mist. They simply trust the deep, unmoving earth to carry them through the darkness, allowing their roots to rest in the quiet damp below. You can rest in the very same way tonight, letting your body become heavy, and letting your breath move like a quiet, warm thaw through the stiffest places of your neck. Let the deep, uninterrupted silence claim your mind now, carrying you into a dreamless, beautiful, and restorative rest. Let your focus drift further and further away from the active world of comparison, allowing your thoughts to dissolve like loose silk fibers in the cool mountain water. You have set down the heavy cedar box of your expectations, and you have fully earned the right to simply exist without a plan. The unpainted paper of your life is wide, open, and completely safe, holding the weight of your journey without a single drop of friction. You are permitted to let your water rest, letting your breath move like a slow, quiet mist through the quiet spaces of your heart. Sleep is opening its wide, velvety clearing around you, inviting your consciousness to melt into the deep, weightless dark of the night. Technical line. Delivery part 8 of 8. The deep mountain night has now pulled its heavy, quiet mantle completely over the high terrace of the Bloomist Peak. Every demanding path of the active day has dissolved into the dark valley below, leaving you entirely alone with the slow, effortless movement of your own chest. The small, quiet shelter of your bedroom has grown wonderfully still, its air smelling of wet slate, damp green moss, and the clean, fresh fragrance of the wild plum blossoms. You do not have to hold your hands in a tight, protective grip tonight. You do not have to watch your thoughts for any sign of a hidden smudge on the silk. The heavy wooden box and the frantic, tight grip of your self-protection have been set down. This is not because you have lost your way, but because you no longer need to force the journey. Let your shoulders, your spine, and the back of your head sink deeply into the soft, supporting linen. You are allowed to let the open paper of your mind become heavy, flat, and completely still on the wide cedar floorboards. Your breathing has found a slow, almost imperceptible rhythm. It is a soft, cool draft that requires no conscious guidance or effort from your analytical thoughts. With each quiet exhalation, the residual friction from the hours of keeping yourself guarded simply drifts away. It leaves you light, spacious, and completely at peace. The small muscles around your eyes have smoothed, your jaw rests loosely, and your hands are lying completely open and soft on the sheets. You are no longer the apprentice calligrapher frantically gripping the brush, and you are no longer the painter trying to block out the rising smoke of the hearth. You are simply this quiet, breathing presence, settling deeply into the centers of your own bones. The ancient stories of the unpainted paper fan and the open silk weave are quietly sinking into the background of your mind. They are turning into a wordless comfort that needs no further explanation. You can feel the profound, healing relief of knowing that your life was never meant to be a rigid, painted screen. The water in the mountain stream is resting quietly under the soft gray blanket of the evening fog, its surface perfectly flat, unruffled, and reflecting only the dark sky. The damp mist continues to settle over the high plum trees, but the silent forest remains perfectly secure, breathing in harmony with the natural wetness of the earth. Let your awareness drift away from the world of constant self-preservation, returning gently to the silent, ancient home that has always been waiting for you beneath your weariness. You have permission to leave every unfinished project and every unpainted space exactly as they are tonight, trusting that the earth knows how to hold your form without your active help. The darkness around you is vast, gentle, and completely friendly, cradling your tired spirit in a sanctuary of absolute rest. There is nothing you need to resolve, nothing you need to calculate, and nothing you need to prove to the quiet space of this room. Sleep is opening its wide, velvety clearing around you, inviting your consciousness to melt into the deep, weightless dark. Your body feels beautifully heavy now, sinking softly into the mattress as if your clay were returning to the quiet, damp mountain from which it was dug. The constant, busy thoughts of the day have softened into a low, comforting murmur, a distant sound that can no longer touch your rest. You are safe to let the fire go out, letting the soft, wet needles of your current moment blanket the active pathways of your mind. They can hold their peace without any effort from your fingers. The universe has taken over the work of protecting your life, allowing your mind to stop its constant vigilance and simply dissolve into the night. Let yourself glide deeper into this quiet pool of rest, feeling the soft texture of the silence as it settles over your temples. The air is still, clean, and cool, carrying no more demands, no more directions, and no more expectations to satisfy. You are completely nameless tonight, a simple breathing presence resting in the vast, peaceful clearing of the world. Sleep is wrapping its soft, damp wool around your spirit, offering you a complete, beautiful, and uninterrupted sanctuary of rest. What if the blank, unpainted spaces you have spent your entire life trying to cover are the very openings that allow the silent night wind to carry you home?